G'day everyone, welcome to Finchats. My name is Hoi.
My name is Hugh.
That's low energy, Hugh. What's going on? Are you alright?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm all right. Just, you know, thinking about some of my debts from uni actually. I know I graduated a while ago, but yeah, there's this indexation of
Yeah,
my HECS loan that
right.
the government wants to increase by 7% in a few days' time. So
Hang
yeah,
on,
I know I finished a while
the
ago,
the
but my
hex is what is
Oh,
the hex
sorry.
is the same as
It's just like it's an outstanding debt that you incur from your university degrees in Australia. So
right.
yeah, I finished about like 4 years ago, but I still have an outstanding balance. And when I look back, I only paid about 5% of
Oh
that
man.
loan, and now it's going to increase again. So I think it's just going to like be higher than when I started, which yeah, it's kind of stressing me out a bit. Yeah.
Why is it stressing you out? Doesn't that happen every year? Like you mentioned that uh you finish uni for 4 years, right? So why are you stressing out?
I mean, it's stressing me out because it's not comfortable to see my debt balance like growing over time. Like, so how it works is that like you pay off your debt through payments from your salary slip. Now
Yeah.
that's above a certain threshold, which is $48,000 in Australia. So once you earn above that amount, you start paying off that debt. I earn a reasonable salary now, but even then, like as I said, I've only paid like uh $2,000 over 4 years, which is just like insane. Like I would have thought I'd be much closer to paying off maybe half, but
Oh,
yes,
right.
it's really made it to now we get an index, so that means the balance will grow by 7.1%. And so, yeah, it's just like I'm going back to square one or even worse. So, yeah, it's just not comfortable to see that debt growing over time.
So the debt, so the university debt isn't, you don't get charged interest, but it's just indexed to inflation.
Yeah, correct.
And
Yeah.
and inflation, if I recall right, inflation is probably the highest, one of the highest in 30 years, right? And that has bumped up the indexation to 7.1%. And
Yeah.
I can right now that I've said it out, I understand now because um, if you look at the median, so assume that you earn, not you, but assume that somebody earns say $60,000 Australian per year, and that depends. The repayment on your university debt is about 2.5% of your salary. So if you're indexing it by 7.1%,
Yeah.
that means that you're going backwards. Is that right?
Exactly. That's why I've been feeling a bit stressed about it recently. It's been all over the headlines on the news here, and we're recording as of the 28th of May. So the 1st of June, it's only a few days away before
Does
a lot of balances increase. Yeah.
doesn't the ATO, the Australian Tax Office, allow you to pay before the indexation? I don't think you have much time. I think the deadline,
Yeah.
if you want to make voluntary payments to reduce the amount before it's indexed, is
Yeah.
the 31st of May, right? So can't you pay in a little bit more? Or if you
Yeah.
can?
That's actually, I mean, you're spot on. Like, yes, there is an option to make voluntary payments to reduce the debt balance. Um, now I don't want to. This is not financial advice for our viewers. Now, I said I was stressed. I think it's more so I was stressed, and I can see like the how it can make you feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but um it really depends on like people's situations. Yes, it would sometimes make sense to make those voluntary payments, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. So if I just go for one example that's supporting both cases, when you make voluntary payments, yes, that reduces your your HECS balance. So what that can do is, say your goal is to purchase a house, and one of the criteria is you need to, well, pay off your HECS that will increase your borrowing capacity, which would allow you to, purchase a house because you have a higher borrowing capacity. So if that's your goal, then perhaps making large voluntary contributions to reduce your HECS debt might make sense. But let's say you don't have that goal and you really don't have any sort of plan to purchase a house. And paying off a HECS debt wouldn't really make sense because there's an opportunity cost. With those voluntary payments, you could instead put that in a savings account, which would generate some sort of interest payment. That can actually more than offset the indexation. So it really comes back to, what are your financial goals in life? Because there is no right or wrong answer to this question. And, a lot of people are getting flooded with this on Reddit, etc.
Yeah, and I guess, as you mentioned, this isn't financial advice, and everyone's financial situation is different. So please consult your financial advisor for your specific circumstances. But those are the options that you're considering, right, Hugh? Or
Yeah, correct. So this is my personal sort of stance right now. Firstly, I don't have any sort of aspirations to, well, I do have aspirations, but it's not near enough for me to make voluntary repayments. Let's say I'm looking to purchase a house in the next 2 or 3 years. I might look to aggressively make voluntary payments a bit closer, maybe 1 or 2 years out. But in the meantime, because interest rates are so high, instead of making voluntary payments, I've been using that to put it in that high interest savings account, which is earning around 4%. Now, that is generating some sort of interest, quite high compared to historical standards. And at least that's given me some sort of comfort and reducing my stress levels. So I know that, yes, I might be falling behind on my HEX balance, but I'm making up for it in a separate account, which is a savings account. And I think
and
one more thing that I add, Hoy, is that HEX is actually one of the only debts that doesn't have any interest attached to it.
yeah,
So the compound interest in a negative sense doesn't actually work for HEX. It's only indexed over time. So for me, it's probably a debt that I would die with. And so I'll just leave it as it is because there's no interest attached to it. It won't grow exponentially. It's just indexed to some sort of CPI figure or inflation figure.
yeah, and CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, the inflation,
Yeah.
generally has been quite low. So,
All right. Yeah.
that's why it's popped up. This issue has popped
Yep.
up recently because it's quite high, 7.1%.
Yep.
And, I was looking at the figures the other day. The long-term average inflation rate is only 2.5%, which
Yeah.
shouldn't come as a surprise because the target range for the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia,
Yeah.
to control inflation is between 2 to 3%.
Yes.
So, if hopefully this spike in inflation or the indexation, which is linked to inflation, is temporary, and that over the medium to long run, that the inflation rate will go back down to its
Yeah.
normal range. Otherwise,
Yeah.
if it doesn't, we're all going to be in trouble because we can't have elevated inflation for too long. Otherwise, we're going to go into recession and depression, etc. So I know that has not direct links to the HEX debt, the university debt, but inflation itself does impact how much you pay on HEX. So
And I think that's an interesting point. Like the reason why this has made headlines is because we're in such a high inflationary environment. You know, this topic hasn't really been brought up in normal inflation environments where we were at 2.1 or 2.2%. It's really just, I think, in my personal opinion, it's just making headlines because it's such a large indexation number. But as you point out, my personal sort of forecast and opinions is that inflation will revert back to its 2% range in, let's say, 2025. If you just stick it out and have some patience, you might see a bit more normality out there. Mm.
yeah, depending on whether you believe the RBA Some people do, some people
Yeah, that's
don't.
a very,
Uh,
very good caveat, Hoi. Very good. But yes,
um,
independent of what the RBA thinks, I generally think that there will be some disinflation over time, just because
yeah,
of technological advancements that are occurring, and things are becoming a bit more
yeah.
productive, generally over the long run. So hopefully we start to see that number come down.
Well, it's already come down in last December quarter,
Mm.
2022. Inflation, if I remember, was 7.8%, which is the highest in
Yeah,
30 years. In the
yeah,
March quarter this year, it's already come down to around about 7%. So
yeah.
the trend, although the actual number, the actual inflation is still quite
Still
high,
high.
the trend is going downwards. And if you believe the RBA, their own forecast for next March quarter, for March 2024, is that inflation would be roughly around 4%. So
Yep.
if you believe them, it will come down to around about 4%. But um, it's up to you to decide, I guess, what's the best way. If you have
Yeah.
funds to repay, then great. But if not, just have comfort that the inflation rate is coming down. I did read somewhere that some people are considering to borrow to pay some of the debt off before the indexation. Now, I'm going to caveat it again, but we're not financial advisors, and you should seek your own financial advice. But generally, if you do that, what you want to do is make sure that your borrowing cost isn't higher than what your
Yeah.
indexation is. So if you're borrowing at, say, for example, 10%, but then you're only indexed at 7.1%, it doesn't really quite make sense. You would only borrow to pay off something if you can borrow at a lower rate. Um, so after all that, what are you going to do, Hugh? Are you still stressed, or do you take some
No,
comfort that it's
yeah, I think
inflation's coming
as I
down?
said, yeah, I as I said before, and the to the point I was coming back at, I generally don't feel like stressed anymore. I think the more I look at that balance growing, yes, you could, but yeah, I do have that comfort with seeing that interest come through on the high interest savings account. Um, HECS is one of those debts that doesn't have interest attached, so it won't grow exponentially. It probably grows more linearly. So I'll leave it as it is. But yes, please don't take this as financial advice. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of HECS and whether you should pay your HECS or not. It's a very controversial sort of topic at the moment, but these are our thoughts, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. So without further ado, thank you very much, and we'll catch you in the next video.
See you guys.
Yeah.